Let's get to David Williams. David is of the Taxpayers. He's a president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and he's joining us now. We're going to be talking a little tax reform coming up, and we're certainly looking forward to that. And David Williams is the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance in his 22 years in D.C. Wow, I've only been there 4 months. January, February, March, April, May. I've been there 4 months. He's been there 22 years. I don't know how he stands it in D.C. David has become an expert in finding and exposing government waste and has helped fine-tune criteria in identifying and ultimately eliminating earmarks. David has appeared on numerous TV, radio, and print outlets such as ABC, News Tonight, The Jim Bohannon Show, and The New York Times. David's international expertise ranges from appearing on government waste panels in South Korea and France. He's also advised taxpayer groups from around the world and was instrumental in helping form a taxpayer group in Great Britain. David, welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you. And there is so much frustration out there with this Congress and what they haven't done. And what's interesting, after the election, the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, we huddled together and we said, you know what our theme for 2017 is? No more excuses. You have Republicans controlling the House, the Senate, and now the White House. There are no more excuses for not passing spending cuts, for not passing tax reform, for not repealing Obamacare. But, you know, most importantly is the tax reform part, because I think that this is something that is going to get the most bipartisan support of anything that is out there right now. And it's very frustrating that Congress has not addressed tax reform yet.
Well, President Trump outlined a pretty bold tax reform package a week ago. No details, David, but it was pretty bold. I mean, I have to say, of all the things I've seen him do, that was pretty exciting. He did that. Gary Cohn, I was at the press conference in the White House where Economics Director Gary Cohn and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin basically outlined it, and it, called for a reduction in the corporate tax to 15%, doubling the standard deduction for every American, repatriation, a one-time deal, getting our $2.5 trillion back, simplifying the code, going from 7 brackets to 3, keeping some of the key deductions, obviously, like children, housing, things of that nature. And it looked like it was going to be a major tax cut for everybody. And they thought if they could do that, they could get 3% growth, which would then overpay for the tax cut. So basically, you'd cut taxes, grow the economy, create jobs, enlarge the pie. And even though the tax revenue would go down, the tax rates would go down, the revenue would go up, just like happened under John F. Kennedy and Reagan, the old Hoffer bell curve, if you will. You lower rates and revenue actually goes up. You get to 3%, you grow out of the deficit by the increased money coming in, right? Makes sense. Here's the problem. How do they get this done when you look at the budget that just passed and they wouldn't repeal Obamacare? I got to ask you, David Williams, great plan. You know it's going to get to Paul Ryan's desk, and it's DO8, right? How do we get this done?
So I think this is different. I think tax reform is different than health care reform or spending cuts, and I'll tell you why. I think that spending cuts, you appear as if you're taking something away from someone, because people have been getting money from the government through these spending programs for decades. So you're taking something away from people. People are perceiving that if Obamacare is repealed, you're taking away their health care. I don't believe that's true, but that's the perception. Now, tax reform, you are giving somebody something. You're giving them more time if you simplify the system, and you're giving them more money in their pocket. And that's why I think Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are looking at this the wrong way, is that tax reform, you're giving something to people, and that's why, and I'm not, being naive here, but I really do believe that it can have bipartisan support. And you mentioned the corporate tax rate, cutting it from 35 to 15%. It can't be emphasized enough how important that is for the economic growth of this country. And we're not talking about just these big, multinational companies that will be getting this tax cut. We're talking about small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, that this will be an amazing shot to the arm for them to have more money to expand, as you said, expand the tax base, grow the tax base, not shrink it and try to get more money out of fewer people. So I can't emphasize enough how important cutting the corporate tax rate will be for economic growth in this country.
Don't you think, David, and I agree with that. I mean, this is, to me, if there is a hill to die on for Trump over the summer, this is going to be it. But you get wary. And House leadership, don't you think they just need to find a spine and not cave in the way they just did on this budget and stand for something? And can we ever hope that these people will?
They overthink everything. They're overthinking this, and it's just put a plan on the floor of the House, go for a vote, and see what happens. But they're so afraid. They need courage. I mean, I feel like we're in the Wizard of Oz, and they need the courage to do it because they will be supported by the American people. And listen, some of them, some of the Democrats on the left will never support what the Republicans are doing. But I think some of the moderate Democrats would actually jump on board with this tax plan. And again, this is something that they need to stop talking about and just do. Just do it. That was a slogan for a shoe a long time ago.
Just do it, right? Look, the U.S. tax code is outdated. It's complex. It's full of loopholes that don't benefit working people. They only benefit those in the higher income brackets. They stay there because of the billions of dollars. We just went over this, $3 billion spent by lobbyists just lobbying Congress in 2015. It's a huge number. Now, Virginia taxpayers and businesses, they've waited a long time for tax reform that's actually going to get America working for everybody again. We need a tax reform plan, David, that simplifies the process for everybody, closes these loopholes that drive average people bananas so that everyone pays their fair share, right? I'm in the middle class. I don't have these loopholes. The top 1% does, and they're put in there by the lobbyists who are getting funded by those companies and people in order to keep the loopholes. That's what is so frustrating. It sets a fair rate to allow businesses to compete domestically and invest here in the United States, including getting this $2.5 trillion back that's parked overseas.
Yeah.
Because if they bring it back, it's at 35%. Just think of that. You infuse $2.2 trillion into the U.S. economy tomorrow. What happens, David?
You're going to see amazing economic growth. And you talk about the complexity of the tax code. I mean, it was only 2 weeks ago that we had tax day. And I can't believe that, Congress isn't cognizant of the outrage that occurs every April 15th. The tax code is 10 million words. War and Peace is 580,000 words. I mean, what does that tell you when War and Peace looks like a pamphlet compared to today's tax code?
It's just ridiculous. So Trump laid it out, right?
Yep.
So what happens now?
What happens now is, unfortunately, Congress goes on vacation for the next week and a half. But when they get back, what they need to do is, again, is what I said, is just put a plan together, put it on the floor of the House, and have a vote. They're so afraid of having votes, whether it's health care or tax reform. They've been talking about this for years. It was Dave Camp who was the head of the tax writing committee a few years ago with Max Baucus in the Senate. He was a Democrat, by the way. They went on this road show, and people told them, cut taxes, simplify it. And then last year, Kevin Brady, who's now the chairman of Ways and Means, the tax writing committee, they've done the same thing. So we know there is a plan. So what is the delay? Put it on the floor of the House. Do something. Don't just talk about it, because time flies by. I mean, it's already May, and I don't want to have the same conversation with you in October. I may be more than happy to, but I really don't want to. I want to talk about the tax reform plan that has passed.
We're talking to David Williams. He's the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. He's also part of an organization that I subscribe to, Main Street Growth and Opportunity Coalition. We appreciate him being on today. David, look, this is an unprecedented opportunity we have. Republican president, Republican House, Republican Senate. We have got to get this done. Just so everybody knows, our corporate tax rate right now is at 35%. That is the highest corporate income tax rate in the free world. The highest, including not-so-free countries. It's the highest.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
how do you compete when it's the highest rate? That's why they park the money overseas. U.S. small businesses can pay tax rates as high as 40% when you add in the extras. So you're paying 40% small businesses on every dollar, plus you got all the regulations, plus you have to pay all the taxes, get health care for your employees. It's like, why would you do that? Who would start a small business today with these taxes? Right?
Right. And Canada has a 20% corporate tax rate. China, I think, has a 23% corporate tax rate. How do we have a higher corporate tax rate than China?
You know, Russia?
And you mentioned
What's
small
Russia?
I just want to make a point that small businesses can't leave. You have big multinational companies that will, what they call do an inversion, where they'll go to Canada, like Tim Hortons and Burger King when Tim Hortons bought Burger King. But if you're a small business, you can't do that. You have to deal with where you are, and you're right. 40% is the real tax rate when you look at the state's take on this.
If you're in a small business and you're in a state with a corporate income tax like Virginia, which is 6% or something, you're paying basically 41% in tax. Well, it comes down to about 40% when you deduct the state taxes. So you're paying 40%. So forget all the other expenses you have. Every dollar of profit that you make, if you got like a 5% margin, okay? I mean, for every $100 you get in, you make $5, and then you pay $2 in that in taxes. It's like, who would do this? It's crazy. In Virginia, the House GOP tax blueprint would create about 50,000 jobs and increase the median household income by over $5,000. See, that's the kind of growth we need, right?
It is, and it's easy. This should not be so difficult. The Republicans are making it a lot more difficult than they should. And I want people to call their members of Congress and tell them to do tax reform now, because, it reminds me, and I'm going to go way back now, in 2005, the Bridge to Nowhere, when we were mad as a country, we didn't want this bridge built. So what did we do? We became active. We started a grassroots campaign, and we killed the Bridge to Nowhere. Why can't we do this with tax reform? Is have people call their members of Congress and demand that they pass tax reform.
Tell you what, we got to take action. Call your U.S. Senator, your Congressman, say, we want tax reform, and we want it right now. You know the drill. David, we're out of time. I want to thank David Williams for being with us. He is the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Dave, thanks for being with us. People want more info. What's your website?
We're at protectingtaxpayers.org. There's a way you can contact me directly through the website, but as you said, please remain active and call your member of Congress. It's the only way this is going to happen. All right, Dave, I got to roll. Thanks for being with us. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. I'll be right back. Keep it right here.